If you would just Google AI in architecture, I would say 80% is parametricism. The skill required to actually model that or script that is another step, and I don't think it's as momentous and Grasshopper and all these tools. This was, I think, a bigger shift forward. What I see now, it doesn't lead to a new paradigm. It leads to more productivity and let's say more versatility within the paradigm. And Zaha was most compelling, convincing. I already thought she was the best, but then she came across very well, very genuine and not showing off, but convinced me that I should. First call would be to try to get into her studio, and it worked out. It was very much a means to an end for her. She noticed that we can generate things faster, also maybe more beautiful, more consistently beautiful. I mean, early on when we started to script, she realized the superiority of that. So we started with Model Shop and small Macs. First was the folder, the pleated, then there became the soft folds, then blobs came in, and then the next one was these kind of swarms. And this was generative components. The bigger step now then was when we started to use Ectonism, where a lot of Grasshopper plugins and so on.
That's it. We're live. Welcome, guys, back to another podcast here on the ArchiTech Network. And today we have a very special podcast for our 60th milestone podcast. Someone that needs very little introduction. We have with us today Patrik Schumacher, the principal of Zaha Hadid Architects. Patrik, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I've been wanting to have you on for a while. I feel like it's the perfect time. So typically, we actually don't get a lot of the kind of principles from these big firms on. We usually talk to the kind of, let's say, the tech nerds, the code team. But actually, in your case, you're such an expert in the area. You've obviously coined so many of the terms and things like that. It's inevitable we finally get you on. So I really appreciate your time today. I thought I'll start with a little bit of a trip down memory lane. Because I've seen you talk about this once or twice, but I just wanted to touch on the moment you actually met Zaha and you kind of made this decision, right, that you wanted to work for. I've seen you talk about it once, but yeah, just give us that little introduction.
Well, this was a while ago. So yeah, I was a student at the South Bank, actually. I came from Stuttgart. I encountered her work in Stuttgart around 84, 85. There was some publications, the AIInArchitecture. She had won the peak competition in was published in 83, etc. There was an AA publication. So I got interested already. I came to London and we were highly aware of Zaha in the studio where I was learning. And so I took note of a conference which was at the Tate, which was scheduled in 88 before the Deconstructivism show in MoMA. They had, for some reason, launched the pre-conference in London rather than in New York, where all the participants were there, including the curators like Mark Wrigley and Philip Johnson. And Zaha was most compelling, convincing. I already thought she was the best. But then she came across very well, very genuine and not showing off, but genuinely trying to explain what she was up to. So convinced me that I should. First call would be to try to get into her studio, and it worked out.
Yeah. And I think I've seen you explain that, I guess you were kind of thrown in at the deep end. You started to kind of take on projects quite early, particularly with Vitra Fire Station. I feel that was the big project.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the studio was super small. She had an assistant, and then there were, I think, 3 or 4 other employees. And for competitions, there was a kind of group of ex-students who came on evenings and weekends to pitch in for free. So that's where we were. And so Vitra came along as a job. And yeah, I was the only German speaker, and I was anyway in the studio every day until midnight. and mostly by myself in the end in the last hour. So I took that on. It took a long time to get somewhere satisfying because it's quite difficult to do something beautiful out of a fire station, which had a garage and a few smaller spaces attached to it in this kind of surrounding. So we were struggling and had to postpone and frustrate the client multiple times because we weren't ready with anything we liked. So he always said, "Yeah, I like it. Let's do it." No. We don't like it. We're not happy with it. So it was an interesting struggle.
And at that time, it was mostly kind of drawing, right? You didn't really have...
I mean, I had, in my student time, so I was still a student at the time, I interrupted my studies to move to Zaha's studio. I had worked with computers a little bit, but the studio didn't have any. And so we were, first of all, exploring, we were just hand sketching, not even setting up proper perspective. But then in terms of the geometry, it was just plotting by hand curves into 3D space with coordinates. And that was also a bit of a challenge. So yeah, we had no computers. We acquired them a year or so later to sketch, but not yet to draw properly. That happened then another 2 or 3 days later. So
yeah. So one thing I've always wanted to ask you was what was kind of Zaha's outlook on technology? I always thought this was like a component that you brought to the office, but what was her outlook on technology? Was she a bit of a tech evangelist herself, or was it kind of like a means to an end?
It was very much a means to an end for her. And she noticed that we can generate things faster and also is more versatile and also maybe more beautiful, more consistently beautiful. I mean, in particular, when it came to the use of splines, or also then early on when we started to script, she realized the superiority of that with respect to what she was looking for in architecture, this consistency, fluidity, poise, and complexity with a lot of coherence embedded, which is difficult. You need a lot of talent and commerce to generate that. I mean, it comes also out of the rapid hand movements, which have an inherent physics to them. So if you're very talented on that, you can generate a lot of these effects, fading effects and swelling on the kind of dynamic of a fast-moving pen. Has these continuously changing coherent curvatures like whiplash kind of geometries, and then we used a lot of French curves from the shipbuilding industry and had specially made sets of curves to translate that. But still, it was to begin with. I mean, it required some kind of hand sketching, which was then hardlined, and also the 3D element was hard to get by. So then it was model making and so on and so forth. And it relied much more on talent, which was exceptional, let's say, than using those processes which were more fail-safe into what we were looking for. And she noticed that. And it was faster in Metaverse, of course.
Yeah. Interesting. I've always interested where so at what point, when did the kind of technology components start to play more and more of a role? For example, you guys are synonymous with Maya. Like, when did Maya start to play?
Exist. I mean, we came across kind of earlier versions of this alias wavefront, which we saw. We didn't have. I mean, there were these silicon graphic machines, which I think Columbia University purchased, I think in '84. We've been there in '93. So in '94, we were there in '93, and then Harvard in '94, where we used a lot of software and also already splines and curvature software. My first, so we started with Model Shop, and Small Max. This was more for 3D generating perspectives rapidly. And then I think something which was later called Vectorworks was something I used a lot, which is beautiful spline tools. and also started to use that for setting up all the drawings, but also work on 3D in this Form Z. I mean, it's interesting that the first iterations of folding from, let's say, 93, 94 were all faceted because the nerve surfaces weren't round yet.
Right.
A year later, they merged and everything shifted more elegantly and more fluid. So we had I had at the South Bank in 87, 88, I was using swivel. I mean, we had sporadic explorations, and Columbia University went paperless, I think, in 94, 1 year after we were there. But we had tools available, and there was expertise flying around in the school that Greg Lynn was teaching, Jesse Reiser was teaching. It was all forming at the same time, but what became, folding and architecture in that year. So, but we hadn't, we weren't immediately had these same tools in the office. Right. So we were using them in the schools first.
Yeah.
In 96, of course, when DOL was founded, we had a lot of these very kind of quick. We became fully paperless, and we were kind of flying, with all this stuff.
Yeah, it's quite kind of interesting as you explain the process. It's almost like the visions were there, and the software was catching up to allow you to.
Yeah. I mean, that's why the software was drawn in.
Yeah.
We also had used Xerox machines to distort one-way sizing, or rotating the drawing and under the machine to generate some of these blurs or curvature distortions, and so on, to generate these more fluid compositions. So yeah, it was a craving, and that's why what pulled these computer graphics tools into architecture was that desire. It was even with somebody like Greg Lynn. He said some of this works by hand first. If you think of Kipnis, I was very keenly observing Kipnis at the AA 91, 92. They did kind of quasi computer graphics all by hand. At the precursor to the DRL designers, where they did the Schreebogen competition, and then they did the Haiku master plan. I mean, seminal works, and so I was immediately drawn to that. And Kipnis also, American, he came to the office. He was looking at our work and picking up stuff, and we were in conversation in the early 90s when he was there, and then when we came to Columbia in 93, we plugged in with and observed. I mean, Greg Lynn was already a hot ticket there. He just started teaching the first time as well there. Coming out of the Eisenman office, we had observed closely what Eisenman was doing with the kind of folding stuff even already in 89, 90. It was an exciting time, because what was fascinating, that within the year of 93 and into 94, I mean, 93 was also the publication of Folding in Architecture, which was, Kipnis on one hand with an article, then Greg Lynn. And Greg Lynn had published something 1 year before. But then what I noticed in Columbia, everybody else who wasn't yet on this track, who did quite different things, Kollontai McDonald or Hani Rashid, Ben Van Berkel, people, Alejandro Fashid. I mean, there were many people out there, Jesse Reiser. They have been doing quite different things, some kind of deconstructivism or phenomenology, whatever. And they all shifted instantly, noticing these potentials and seeing some of these compositions. There was a absolutely rapid and within a few months convergence onto a certain paradigm where everybody was looking at everybody else and picking up the same tools, the same. That was very exciting to see, it was compelling everybody, whole generation of architects, into this direction. And when you had the, let's say, the Yokohama competition, everybody produced kind of versions of this. In the AA, Kipnis had left, but there was, Baram Shadell and Ansel doing stuff. And so the AA caught on quickly as well, particularly once we had founded DRL, and they had, Moysen came to the AA from the Harvard, where this had spilled over from Columbia. He brought a lot of people. The AA was too big. There was always other things going on. Columbia went nearly 100% down this path. Harvard had also other things going on. But the AA had, and then we were kind of 60, 70% in this direction. It was exciting time. So, yeah. And then we also quite quickly realized that we have to, we went through all the building typologies. We were the one who went urbanism more strongly. And then tackling issues like, construction, apertures, sorry. So taking on technical issues and questions and reinventing, completing the typologies. And Zaha was very excited about it, very participating in that and investing more and more machines coming in and wanting to, and started hiring from DRL, from Columbia, from Harvard, those people where we had developed the skills and concepts.
Yeah, so it was almost, I guess it was an emergence of computer-aided design. Like, I don't want to say CAD because you think of 2D, but
CAD was an element of that in the sense that we realized, the competitions we had done, we had to make drawings by hands. They had to be big, and we had 10 people trying to draw all the plans of a competition. Lying over, breaking, hurting their backs and scratching. This is what was still going on. And then, so once we had this kind of precursor of Vectorworks, and I got myself onto competition, I could substitute for all of these, doing all the plans as layers of one sets of drawings and do a 3D on the side. And then the productivity gain was massive. But also I thought some of the, you just had more chance to adapt and readapt and evolve the drawing, because it's just too slow and painful to change drawings. And also they weren't consistent. Then when you have to build a model, it's going to be difficult if the drawings are not matching up.
Yeah,
it was a massive productivity and quality uplift, which we experienced with what we're trying to do. These more complex and adaptive, more difficult compositions, let's say, in spaces. I think so I don't know about other firms. Of course, it was also faster to do more normal kind of minimalist drawings. But we weren't yet anywhere near constructing anything. So this was tool sets of being more proficient in competition output.
Yeah, there's elements we'll close the loop on this, but there's elements of what you're describing. It feels like the era we're in today with AI and stuff, where it's a huge productivity gain.
That's right. Yeah, I think there's exactly that.
It sounds a lot like that. And so from there, fast forward, you're then kind of in the parametric era. You, of course, coined the term parametricism, which is sort of the era I left uni and came into this world. I think the first tool I ever used was called Generative Components. It was
very important. A tool, and inspired this whole idea of parametric urbanism, that you can kind of populate a kind of landscape surface with components which were buildings.
Yeah.
And that was a very important. There were a number of these shifts. The first was the folder depleted, then they became the soft folds, which were single surface projects. Then blobs came in, and you had more closed volumes. And then the next one was these kind of swarms, swarm formations, and this was generative components was important, but also other these kind of flocking algorithms and so on. And this was, I call it swarmism after foldism and blobism. I mean, these were expansions of repertoire and opportunity, which we instantly used a lot as well. And the bigger step now then was when we started to use what I call the shift in tectonism, where a lot of with the world of Grasshopper plugins and so on, with mesh relaxation and form finding and the Rhino Vault. I mean, this whole world it was another and the investment in fabrication. I mean, the first instances of this were the excitement with milling machines, and again Greg Lynn was there. But then it became of course, as you know, schools of architecture invested heavily in developing this fabrication sensibilities and feeding that back into the design generation. That came after that. Let's say this kind of I think the generative components thing and parametric models became very, very important. And
I think when I was at university, I was kind of looking up to firms using this, and I think at the time there were kind of the Zaha. I remember Foster's Specialist Modeling Group were big players in this stage, and also a firm I really looked up to as well was Future Systems, that were kind of trying to connect this world of digital, like you say, with fabrication and boat building and all this kind of stuff with the Lord's Media Center, that kind of stuff. And then this kind of explosion of, you say, Rhino and Grasshopper came about, and parametricism was born. We then had tectonism, and then parametricism 2.0. What's your thoughts of parametricism looking back now? Because I think on one, it's a style, right? And it was extremely successful as a style.
I think it's kind of interesting to reflect that when I first mentioned it and I thought about I need to find a term for this, like there was a Smart Geometry conference in 2007, and I tried it out in a lecture, and it was a good response. I then had the Biennale came up. We wrote the Parametricism Manifesto, and I had a session of the Dark Side Club, which was inviting a number of ex-students, young architects, Marian Sung amongst them, etc., and a few others, to present under the headline of parametricism. It's interesting in retrospect that I didn't notice at the time yet that this was also the period where this kind of huge convergence and movement forward soon came to an end. The financial crisis happened in that year, and then the European debt crisis the next year, and there was a lot of these opportunities for young architects all over Europe. I mean, we had, for instance, projects in every city of Spain nearly, and plenty of amazing opportunities in Dubai, and
that's right. Spain, for some reason.
In retrospect, I was wondering, when did it kind of stop to develop? And there was the shift in the schools. There was partly to do Occupy Wall Street and anti-capitalism, and also maybe lack of opportunity. This kind of shift of sensibility. The moment of announcing parametricism, it was already doomed in the sense of spreading further. I mean, for me, it was clear. It was the way I saw it spread through the 90s and into the early 2000s, and take over the AA, all the main elite universities in SciArc, and then bring it to Chicago, etc., etc. It seemed to be unstoppable, for the first, and then it didn't continue. Didn't continue to spread. Of course, the people who are working and who were committed, we all kept developing and deepening it, like something like Achim Menges in Stuttgart, and you had more things going on at ETH. So there was a core group, Gamatio Kola and so on. There was a core group of people who were just keep progressing, but there wasn't no new generations flowing in, or maybe only our students, which we still can draw in and excite into it, but it wasn't spreading any further. That's, I think, it was to do with the times, with the political times, the economic times, and we are still, and then this kind of vogue takeover of the institutions, accelerated. It started then, I think. I think now I see glimpses out of this. If I look at the Biennale, but also look at the whole AI thing and what people use it for, and as well as Metaverse as a frontier, where I see mostly parametricism kind of approaches. So I've recently been kind of thinking that parametricism will now finally happen more broadly.
Do you think there's a component where, I think in that era of parametricism, people kind of got their hands on Grasshopper and these other tools. They suddenly had the ability to create really expressive, complex forms, right? And I felt like the reason there was this kind of boom and maybe bust of them getting actually built was because we kind of lost, there was only a few people that had the knowledge to actually build them, right? Do you think there was this component of this disconnect between the architects coming up with this, but not necessarily having the knowledge of transforming that into actual constructible geometry?
Yes, I think there's an element of this. There was an over-exuberance, and
right.
I mean, there were excesses, let's say, which could have been compromising them, putting to disrepute some kind of fundamentally very sound and highly rational movement. The other thing which I always thought that when it came that there was, the schools and avant-garde, let's say, movement around parametricism was highly technologically oriented, smart geometry and so on, which was positive. That was good. I mean, that's not, but what was lacking, I think, and was hard, there was no dialogue with these, let's say, on the sociological front, on the socioeconomic front, on those people who are looking for societal meaning and what this means, that we were looked at as nerds and cat monkeys, etc. At the A, for instance, the atmosphere was this. There's a presumption. Imagine that the DRL and we don't have theory. I mean, it's an absurd presumption. But so that is another element why in the academic and world there were other themes and topics which the world of the protagonists of parametricism were just not engaging with. And so I saw my role to engage more with this aspect. And I see, things historically and socioeconomically with the development of post-Fordism. And I mean, some of that was on a technological and production side was understood, non-standard and flexible specialization, customization, mass customization, all these phrases. That was understood, but that this has interesting and actually liberating and advancing sociological, societal consequences with the knowledge economy, and not only transforms the solution space through all the tech means we have, but also the problem space, kind of urban convergence, complexity, mixed use, integration, etc. So that is these elements I was focusing, writing about and thinking about. This is partly there wasn't enough of that, which is partly why in the academic world we've lost some ground as a movement. But also this aspect, yes, there was on the one hand too much technology focus, but then there was also not enough depth of skill, in many of the early protagonists, let's say. But I think now what I find exciting, as I said, if you would just Google AI in architecture, I would say 80% is parametricism.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to generate. So there's a desire there. Of course, it's the skill required to actually model that or script that is another step, and but it shows where a certain generation of architects want to go, and I find that very optimistic.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. It's undeniable that with AI, people very quickly start to gravitate towards parametric, fluid, there is an interest in that, and I think the public would love to see more buildings like that. And it's also part of why you guys are so famous in the general public, right?
That's right. They're very super popular. I mean, there's no other brand, major firm is coming anywhere near in terms of popularity.
Yeah.
And the other thing is China. China is still, although they had Xi and some kind of traditionalists criticizing some of the, let's say, innovative and unusual forms, this is still going on.
Yeah.
And recently somebody said, well, parametricism is a kind of national style of China, but against the kind of desire of the Communist Party, let's say. It's a groundswell of some kind. And so unfortunately now China is slowing down temporarily in terms of this development push a little bit.
But I feel that the rise of as China slows down, there's the rise of the Middle East, and I think there seems to be as much
Middle East, India as well. There's a lot of talent which we've been teaching Indians and Chinese for the last 30 years. A lot of them also going back and doing work, and that's another wave. So I think it will come, and as these technologies diffuse and as contractors become more geared up to handle this complexity logistically and through their tooling, eventually I think it will spread more. And because in the end, in particular with tectonism, you have a lot of potential material and then economic gains as well. So the projects where where you can use shell action or use tensor forms or more sophisticated structures, or more sophisticated, let's say, shading systems which transform, you get some gains, and things in the end are lighter and cheaper. That's the outlook. So there will also be better utilization of complex sites, of better utilization of spaces. If you have something more closely adapted to different parts of the site and different parts of the programs, rather than using too much repetition and symmetry. I think eventually this will come through also, not only surcharges, which is still maybe at the moment the case, but will turn in the opposite. There will be efficiency gains. That's anyway something which I consider to be very important. But I also emphasize it's not only desire, it enhances, in my view, the legibility of the built environment. If you use convex concave, if you use curvature, if you can bring parts of a building more together by rather than allowing composition to fall apart. So you can have more difference at play, which distinguishes situations and adapts functionally, but also recognizably different to identify subparts, but also express how they belong together and function together. So there's an eligibility enhancement for the built environment coming out of that. We can certainly see that also when we do master plans, that we can generate more a unified geometric and morphological character and identity and image for an urban district, yet have it differentiated. So compared to that, a lot of times you either have monotony or you have a random spill, and you don't generate character and you don't generate global form, except very simplistically with a symmetry axis or something. So these kind of advantages, they need to be kind of talked about and explained. And when we have a chance to explain and present master plans, we can win them. There's sometimes also an intuitive appeal. There's somehow, oh, this is my area. They can identify it. They see a certain hierarchy expressed. So I think this is also with buildings. There is social functionality advantages. I'm very much into this, orientation, navigation, legibility interface, while maintaining complexity and variety. These kind of intuitive advantages come through when. That's why we win competitions as well. I think it's the other part, of course, is still, let's say, something which will wear off. Novelty aspects, or what people call the iconic. It's not something we foreground, but it comes out of a very great process. But these buildings still look other and unusual, and I mean that helps sometimes. In some contexts, it doesn't help in other contexts. But I don't think it reduces to this. So it's good. It helps us now sometimes to get work. But I think there's a deeper rationality, and this would that when this novelty aspect wears off through this being more universally applied set of paradigms, you can still maintain a lot of diversity, because the repertoire or this paradigm allows for much more internal diversity than other approaches.
Yeah.
And the novelty element might wear out, but at that time we have a more consistent, coherent built environment.
Yeah. And how important has the code team been in Zaha? So I was trying to find the exact time you guys founded Code. I get the sense it was around 2007, 2008, maybe?
Yeah, that's probably right. Well, it's very important on a number of levels. So, first of all, as a service to a lot of the major complex geometry projects, they're doing a lot of work, taking a lot of optimization and workflow optimization and controlling. And it's not only the code team. We have also diffused experts. We're not tied into the code network, but code is also, of course, doing original research and developing the workflows, developing the tools, developing the algorithms and scripts. So, and then go in and apply them to many projects. So that's one aspect. But it also connects, and with more experimental projects like this, 3D printed bridge, this kind of collaboration with something like the Block Research Group and small pavilions, and like the one in Mexico City, the computational knitting formwork, or this kind of compression only concrete, printed masonry, if you like. There's been a number of these researchers and pavilions. They show the way, and some of them don't have yet get full application, large scale application, but they connect up with some studio research at the Venice universities, and there's this whole curved folding things, and we use them in experimental studies. And then we have small structures, maybe some furnishings, pavilions, and then we scale up to larger projects. Combination of, we had, for instance, the Serpentine Pavilion, and then we do the proper permanent Serpentine North Gallery, From there, we went on to, for instance, the Tokyo Stadium, and using similar ideas of shell and tensile structures. So this has been very important to me, and it's actually something which is still not fully diffused within the office. The use of such tools and the sensibility of, let's say, tectonism over and above what we had under previous versions of parametricism. It's still a rolling out process.
Yeah,
because
slow.
of skill levels and also sensibilities, and we have to keep pushing and disseminating internally. It of course always lends itself more to some projects rather than others. But I think every project could and should have more of that. And that is why we're going to build code up, increase the numbers of people. But code is also taking on new, and we have different research groups now. We have nearly 10% of researchers who are doing partly research, partly, research group, taking on new topics, like what we had now at the Biennale, the participatory urban development platform, this idea of using Metaverse and components and choice processes to develop urban ensembles is one aspect. I have the kind of agent-based, this is not code, but another research team, occupancy simulations, and we interested in corporate planning. So we have a whole suite of tools for corporate space planning, as well as generative furnishing and using machine learning to have optimized furnishings. There's a number of research groups. We have the environmental engineering front end team. So code is part of an overall technology cluster, which we have. It's the biggest, the most kind of diverse part of it. But the technology cluster is now, it's exactly 10% of our staff.
That's good.
That umbrella, and we're also doing new workflow things. We're investing in Omniverse, but as you know, and we have founded a Metaverse company, so we're heavily using Unreal.
Yeah.
And we have a sub team of code is doing AI tool development, and in every project now we're training up these, LoRa networks to target, and we're exploring already with Sora with video generation, and we have done this whole thing of training. We're teaching tectonism to AI, so we can build up some of these tectonic articulation inputs, for instance, generate a skeleton and translate it all into curved folding, or learning topology optimization patterns. So there's the AI research team again is, so the code, although it's large, we don't have enough to disseminate all of these elements to everybody.
Yeah.
And of course,
it's always a challenge.
So it's still, even with our company, this rollout and making universal of the approach, even with all the help of these tools, is still not trivial.
Yeah. Maybe AI can help.
Yeah, it will certainly help.
It
certainly help.
What's your view on how AI has shaped inside the practice and outside the practice? It seems a lot of the way you're describing those early, pivotal moments kind of repeats here, but on steroids.
No, definitely. Productivity boost. I don't know if it's more, less. It's equivalent. And my experience, sometimes people think, well, this will carve into, we might not need so many people, and this might in the end erode fees and so on. I don't believe that. The experience was different. It just makes us more productive. We can do more and deliver faster to clients, more versions, more options, and win out over competition as well. So actually, I don't think even scaling that up, it will be a problem for the industry. Because
has it disrupted your design, would you say? Do you feel like
disrupted? Not really. it just have more options and
you're iterating
faster
faster.
visualization for clients.
Yeah.
Iteration. So but I think it's really also a creativity boost. The kind of ideas one can kind of push, and it's also, as I said, it democratizes to this extent more that many teams can try something. So we can avoid bottlenecks. We have we have code, and we have the so-called Z cluster, Zaha cluster, because that was Zaha's idea, bringing the top talent, also computationally skilled, into kind of front-end design team. And that we still have maintained that. But we have, again, they can't do everything. So then AI tools also help to have more people quickly generate sketches. I mean, they all could do it, but there's this kind of some element of productivity gains. Yeah, it's similar, I would say. Comes at the right time where competition is heating up, and in China we have to generate so-called sketches to get onto a short list, and these are photorealistic.
Yeah.
So we've used AI a lot for that, to quickly get something out to get us onto the shortlist. And I think a lot of other companies have caught up on this. So I mean, of course the clients get spoiled quickly. And
exactly. They got renders straight away.
This, but overall the decisions, I think the results are more considered if you select out of a larger pool of options. And some of these options are, let's say, have novelty and originality qualities, which I appreciate. Then I think we're making some progress here. I don't think it's as momentous and as, let's say, the parametricism original, let's say, the introduction of algorithms and computational design, Grasshopper and all these tools. This was, I think, a bigger shift forward. What I see now, it doesn't lead to a new paradigm. It leads to more productivity and, let's say, more versatility within the paradigm for us. That's what I see. So it's not of the same importance, but you're quite right. There's a similar feeling of massive productivity boost.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. I've kind of felt like the same thing as a huge productivity boost, but I haven't really seen it disrupt the design or the design process that much in these firms.
Not that much. I mean, it democratizes in a sense that more people can participate. And I think at the margin it does generate. I mean, even when I'm playing around with this, I'm generating in the firm. We're developing all these tools, and we basically Stable Diffusion plus a lot of networks, specialist networks boosting, but people using also Leonardo and Midjourney and everything, and we have Discord channels, so we see what everybody's doing. I'm dabbling myself, and it's very similar to, because I'm with the most minimal of doodles and verbally and just hand gesture. It's very similar to speak to teams and saying, make me options and typing in prompts. So it is similar to interface. For me, it's very similar interfacing with interfacing with a team.
That's interesting. You got a new super team member.
Yeah, I have some kind of a little home and late night team. Don't have to bother anybody for a meeting. So,
is there any concern at all that you said like democratization, but there was always a kind of moat in that it was difficult to create a Zaha like projects because there was a level of modeling skill. You may need to know some kind of parametric tools, but now anyone in theory can create, these kind of more complicated forms. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I don't feel the heat of competition because we also, we've developed the AI in a much more targeted way, so we can we can fit it to. I mean, we have this fantastic urbanism. We're doing a lot of urbanism, and you can kind of deck out, just color code. This is roads, this is green, this is water, this is different types. and then you fill this up with photorealistic, because that's the way clients want to look, and also for us to imagine it. So I feel for us, we're front running anyway. And the other thing is this, that the track record of downstream delivery still counts, of course.
Yeah.
So I think for young firms it's great, and for, but they won't. I don't think these kids easily compete with us for real jobs. But what I like about it is that there is this kind of ferment of, this is what architecture should look like. So I'm kind of thrilled by it, that this means parametricism becoming hegemonic, finally, which I want. And yes, maybe very recently, maybe in China, there could have been, there's been this thing of rather than having a short list based on track record, they've said sketches. That toughened up the competition, and there you get a lot of unknown firms coming in, and the jury then looks at these sketches and maybe forgets about looking at the track record. So that is hurting us a little bit, I have to admit that. Whether this is AI or without AI, I'm not resentful, because we relied on this when we started in China, that they were not discriminating track record easily. They let us onto jobs which we probably didn't know how to do.
Right.
So that was, I'm very highly conscious that this period of the Middle East as well.
Yeah.
Where we, with renderings and visualizations and ideas, could snap up large projects in China and the Middle East, which in Europe you wouldn't have, no chance. So that's, I would therefore don't resent if somebody else and gets this kind of chance. But seriously speaking, I'm not worried. I haven't yet seen that this is seriously taking away opportunities from us.
And this is not necessarily because of AI, but do you have a concern that the current business model of architecture practices is somewhat failing in a way, where it feels like we're in an era where, technology means we can produce more. I can see teams are getting smaller and smaller. You were describing 10 people making a drawing set, and then suddenly you were able to do it with one. And with AI, you could have a very, very small team. Combine that with most major architecture firms are based in big cities, and architects are kind of getting left behind in terms of salary increase. Do you feel there's a shift coming in the way architecture practices operate from a business perspective, maybe becoming smaller and more nimble?
No, I don't quite see that, because even when we had the plans, let's say highly much more productive, we just do better plans on the one hand, but we also do other things at the same time, and did more, better models or better drawings, paintings, renderings. So you increase, just because let's say the cost part of planning and simulating properly an end product before construction, that extra investment, and you can always have more certainty and more better explanation and visualization. That's always worth it relative to the full construction of a building. And also the time factor. People don't want to often give you more time. There's the interest rate is kind of ticking away, but it makes more sense to save a lot on planning and design. Also this whole BIM thing, you save so much downstream and kind of delays and clashes on site, or making false decision on site. So increasing for instance, we were developing this kind of agent simulation, which would apply more to corporate campuses and large, you made universities and so on. So all of these extra capacities you could make space for, and we can do more. If we have less people on what we're doing now, these people will do other things, also valuable, increasing the quality and certainty of decision making ahead of construction, whereas you have the real costs hitting. You can always do more. That's what I feel. That's why I don't feel that it is for these larger projects we're doing. We've had productivity gains, but the demands have been increasing. Client demands, stakeholder demands, compliance demands, environment. I mean, there are so many more demands from clients and planners, but they also could be more positively offered for, let's say, services, like I said, agent simulations, etc. So that's where I think it won't affect the overall fees, because they should in fact further grow relative to construction, and it would still be an overall economy. If you spend more on fees as a percentage of construction, the package fees plus construction can still be more efficient. That's my view. So I'm not worried. I mean, what I worried, of course, what you have is temporarily you have exuberance, and you have irrationality and superficiality, and it's sometimes some clients, some juries can't quite distinguish that, and right. There's this kind of weeding out process, which in the end I trust in. The discipline will achieve, but of course there's also this kind of potentially discrediting flourish. It's a similar. I mean, this happens in all these kind of fast moving things. Like I love crypto, for instance, and the whole crypto ecosystem is deeply satisfying, and then bright and intelligent, attracts the brightest and best. And then you have also all this kind of scamming,
the shitcoins
and over. So you often have that kind of comes along, and we just have to, as a field, weed out these excesses and have a critical kind of
that's maybe just
that's going on as we proliferate.
A finishing topic because I know I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but just because you brought up crypto, this whole world of blockchain, I'm also a bit of a nerd. Do you feel there's a missed opportunity in the real estate world where we can, tokenize or democratize building? No one is really in theory, you could break a building down into these tokens that you can invest in.
That's the first time I heard about NFTs in the context of fractionalizing real estate. Right. And having these kind of non-identical, let's say, products in a building and fractionalizing that. So definitely, I believe that, and you can liquefy this, and you can allow more people investing in real estate, let's say, and transaction costs are so high, and so on and so forth. So I do believe that there's many missed opportunities in urban real estate development.
Will we ever see a Zaha, ZHA coin where I can put my money into being an owner of the next Zaha building? Yes, I would love. I mean, we have been in contact with some of those early startups and also free market urbanism or market urbanism kind of projects. We've been part of this Roatan project, Honduras Prospera, where we're actually developing this kind of participatory development platform. I mean, they're also having that doesn't directly connect with crypto, but this
new city is fostering crypto and as crypto entrepreneurs. Definitely, there are many missed opportunities because it's so politicized, the planning. It's a tragedy. That's why it also hinders parametricism, because you know that, for instance, in London or the UK, you cannot innovate on the product side, on the architecture side much.
Yeah.
So prescribed, so stifled, that will also therefore firms lack incentives to invest in this, because they somehow see and feel that they probably won't be able to use it here. And that's why I love crypto for trying to kind of break out of an over politicized economy, and the metaverse is another one of those realms. And when we started metaverse, we thought it always much more tied in with crypto,
right?
And thinking of a DAO and so on. And now we're pushing and developing the metaverse. Crypto then went onto this kind of dive, and we don't have to connect it up with crypto, and the fundraising mechanisms of ICOs was also disappearing. So we're going more traditional venture capitalist fundraising, but definitely it might come back. I'm keen and see the opportunities you're hinting at.
Yeah, we didn't. I feel like we could do another podcast on metaverse and crypto and blockchain.
Yes, definitely.
But yeah, I think we'll save that for another time, Patrick, and we'll make a panel or something. I feel like some of the guys at Big were also really into this as well. So yeah, I don't know if maybe what's exciting you right now. Is it mostly AI on the horizon? Is there anything else like fabrication, 3D printing that's really exciting you? I always ask guests as a parting question.
Well, I personally heavily invested in the metaverse development. I really think it will take over. And it's also genuinely an architectural task. And from the design side, and because we do it at the AA as well as we're doing Metrotopia, and it's exciting as a designer. It competes directly with the functionality of all these premises and the design of, framing communicative interaction spatially, ordering and distributing and bringing together, and having kind of net knowledge economy, socializing and communication, conferencing, exhibitions. All of that will take place, and it's architectural tasks, and architecture is very important. Architecture and urbanism and interior design, all of this comes to play. Interaction design, I'm talking about spatiology, phenomenology, semiology, dramaturgy, all this is foregrounded. The engineering stack is substituted. But I think some of the repertoire effects of tectonism, this kind of that richness of morphologies and these families, coherent families of morphologies you can use for the metaverse semiological projects. So I'm excited about this, but it also there we can test a lot of things which will then feed also back into the physical realm, because you have more, let's say, less cost to develop. For instance, in particular, I've been onto this thing, let's say, responsive environments or actively self-transforming and learning environments, particularly in the corporate realm, where you have, self-configuring furniture, where you can open, close, partition, and have dynamized elements. You have it in the art world for the last 20 years, these interactive installations where you have sensors and actuators, and crowds are doing something happens and transforms the space. Now this needs to move into the real world, and I think it will happen first in the metaverse, when we thought out and worked out the functionality and get used to this. That kind of design part of this can then migrate more into the physical world. And I also see a lot of our clients will have both virtual spaces and digital twins of their physical spaces and use them virtually. So we hope to get a lot of clients where we do both the metaverse versions and their physical premises, or also in the metaverse spaces, virtual spaces, extensions of physical spaces, bringing the interfaces into shared built environments rather than only looking at it at home or with a headset. All of that is exciting me. So that's one of my primary agendas. And so maybe it's worth another session. Yeah.
I think that you guys have really jumped onto this quite well. I mean, you've got really cool collaborations with PUBG, and all these Fortnite and all these different.
Yeah. Reimagine London, I think, was quite successful.
Yeah. We're actually having Sharjay on to talk about that as well. But I think there is a race for architects to get in there, because with this AI and game designers are kind of flooding this space, whereas architects, I feel like we're kind of being a bit, it's not building.
I don't see any serious business metaverse on this case. Our Metropia is geared towards the whole of the design ecosystem, addressing all the industrial fashion designers, but also automotive, but also all the architects, urbanism, schools, magazines, conferences, biennales. There's a large world. And I think this will be the first instantiation of a metaverse proper, the way I want to think about it at all. So I don't want to wait anymore for metaverse to happen generally, because there was this huge wave of investment and fading off, and the VCs moved on to AI. I still believe the metaverse is very important. And of course, AI can be integrated. You can maybe prompt inside the metaverse and have geometries popping up, etc., and have that integrated somehow, and also integrate into the builders, in world builders, etc. But I don't see any other metaverse having that quality and seriousness of purpose, because what we have biennales and book launches and panel discussions and show openings, which function very much like, they're really advancing the experience. You have real purposes. It's not about the space itself. It's about what happens, what you can experience and learn in the space, and who you can meet in the space. So it's already competing with, let's say, very well with Zoom sessions, because you can have a Zoom session inside there, spawning a screen, and then so I think it's very competitive and useful, and it's because it's not theater, fantasy, and games. It's framing societal communication interactions. The same purposes we're fulfilling through our buildings, we can fulfill through these virtual spaces, which we should design. That's why I feel it's so seamlessly in a expansion of our task domain, and will be massive avalanche of design tasks where we will need AI also to fulfill this. So that's why I'm excited about it, and also because it will influence the physical designs as well. That's what I believe. So I don't see anybody else doing that to the same extent.
No, I think you guys are definitely kind of leaving that space, which I think it's a bit. I'm sad to not see more architects get into that space, but anyway.
It's partly because maybe the hype has shifted. I'm not. You see that all the times. You have the kind of .com bubble, and then later on it really comes through anyway. So I don't. There was a kind of a lot of people misinvested, of course, who purchased big chunks of decentralized land. So but that's always happening with these waves. So I'm undeterred and know that this will happen, and will be exciting, and will be a lot of opportunity for a lot of architects. Because there's so much to design. So it's not the graphic designers. By the way, they are colleagues. For me, we see ourselves as a design firm. So we also doing fashion. I find it exciting, or interiors, furniture, products. We have never ventured so much in selling graphic design, but we're doing our own graphic design. We've generated our own font, for instance, as well. And definitely substituting a large part of the the internet will become metaverse based, more real time, much better navigation than just typing and clicking, much more browsing, true browsing. So we'll substitute large parts of the internet and substitute or compete with large parts of physical built environments. So it will has two realms to expand into, and is way cheaper than the physical venues,
For sure.
much better than the internet, maybe a bit more expensive than the current internet, but much better. So it's a fantastic middle ground, which will take up quite a lot of our, let's say,
creativity,
but also in our lives. We spend, now we're sitting here. I mean, all my mornings are now, half of my days anyway, online.
Yeah.
So on the other half, after after the early afternoon, I go to the office usually, and but that might stay like this 50-50, or it might be 60-40, and largely metaverse. So we're going to design all of that, and it will be exciting intellectually as well as creatively, but also we can make a lot of people happy and make society more productive.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to finish on. It's exciting.
Okay, let's leave it there.
Exciting future, and a new frontier for architects to join on. Patrick, I just want to thank you so much for the time for coming on. This is our 60th podcast, so it's a special one. So we needed a special guest. So thank you so much, and thank you guys online for joining in. Thank you for the support. And we'll be back next week. We're actually going to be talking to Snaptrude, who are building one of the next generation of AEC tools. So we're going to talk to the founder and go from there. But Patrick, once again, thank you, and we'll see you guys soon.